Welcome to Lawyers Coach. Each episode of this podcast features Claire Rason and Oliver Hansard, both coaches and former lawyers, speaking to various guests and experts in order to find out what makes lawyers tick. Well, that's what normally happens anyway, because in this episode we've done things a bit differently. Claire and Oliver have been interviewing each other so we can get an insight into their backgrounds, experiences and coaching styles. Oliver was first in the hot seat, with Claire firing the questions.
So, Oliver, to start off with, I know that you've had quite a wide-ranging career, so perhaps you could talk me through what you've done.
Absolutely. So I trained with Clifford Chance in the city before they moved out to Canary Wharf. Was there for 3 years and qualified into the project finance team. And then had the good fortune to get a job at IMG, the sports management company, where I had 4 or 5 years having great fun working with golfers, footballers and tennis players, doing a whole load of deals in the sports industry. And I think that was where my real fascination and love of doing deals and negotiation really emerged.
So I understand that after that you moved to dunnhumby. Perhaps you could tell me a little bit about that.
The irony of my job at dunnhumby was that it was billed as a non-legal role, but pretty quickly I became general counsel of the business that at the time had a turnover of something like £10 million and had a real aspiration to grow internationally. And by the time I left 12 years later, it was a 450 million turnover business. And so that was a real roller coaster ride in terms of watching a technology company grow, work with data scientists and entrepreneurs, and travel the world doing deals in all sorts of places I'd never really planned to go. The key thing that really happened there was my move from being general counsel, which was for about 8 of those 12 years. And then finally I moved into that commercial role that was first advertised and became corporate development director. So that was a fascinating time and really instrumental in my career and learning a whole range of obviously legal but commercial skills as well.
And do you think being a lawyer and doing deals helped you move into that commercial role?
So when I describe my kind of legal style, I talk about a spectrum of pure on one end of a spectrum and then applied on the other. And I think over time I became increasingly applied in what I did, and those skills and that experience in doing those deals was instrumental really in me being able to transition into that commercial role.
And were they skills that you kind of picked up on the job, or were they skills that you think were ones that your employers valued and therefore tried to bring out in you?
I think a bit of a mix really, like most things. I think on the one hand, I've always had a fascination with people, love negotiation, love the psychology of negotiation, absolutely. So I've always had that, a real interest in different attitudes and experiences. But I think you blend that with the law, and you're encouraged to develop those skills and that fusion. And it was bringing those two together that I think was really critical in my success in that business.
And you described there that you started off at Clifford Chance and then you moved into in-house roles. What for you is the biggest difference between the two?
I think number one is your client is literally the next door office. And I'm sure there are lots of lawyers in law firms around the world that would absolutely be terrified at the prospect of their client being next door and being able to come in at any time asking where they are on a particular matter. The other aspect, and probably what I really enjoyed the most, was you were really in the business. You really were stuck into the nitty-gritty of the operational side of the business, but then had the good fortune to be on boards, on the exec, and be involved in the development of strategy too.
And just kind of carrying on that theme, one of the things that clients often bemoan of their lawyers or their outside counsel is that they don't understand my business, they're not commercial enough. Do you think that's achievable if you're not, as you say, kind of next door to the decision makers or sat on the boards?
It's interesting you use the phrase there, outside counsel. And I think for any lawyer, private practice lawyer, to succeed with their clients, they should really think of themselves as that inside counsel, as being in-house and part of the team. Yes, you may not be employed by that business, but I think really understanding what's going on, understanding the pain points, the strategy, the motivations of the business and of the leaders, I think that's really crucial. So for me, the kind of the number one thing is to be part of the team.
And is that what kind of attracted you to the in-house roles?
For me, the in-house roles were about, particularly with IMG, it was about sport. And with dunnhumby, it was just to be in a nascent industry. It was the first data science business. And so we were really in new territory, even explaining what data science was and what was possible with understanding customers through a completely different mechanism. That was what drew me to dunnhumby. It was the entrepreneurialism and the innovation, and working with technologists.
And then you mentioned Liberty Global there. So what was it about that role that attracted you and moved you on from dunnhumby?
So at dunnhumby, we were using Tesco Club Card data to help businesses understand more about who were buying their products at Tesco. And so our mantra at dunnhumby was, "You are what you eat." And it was what you eat and what you buy that would describe the type of person you are. At Liberty Global, we had this amazing opportunity with all the set-top box data that the Liberty Global operating companies were collecting to really understand what people were watching in terms of video and what they were consuming and how they were consuming it. So that became, rather than you are what you eat, that became you are what you watched, and you ended up describing people in terms of their viewership habits. And so finding a different angle in the way that data was used was a real attraction and a really fascinating period.
Interesting that you then, and it's how we know each other, obviously, were attracted by coaching and moved into coaching. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Of course. So coaching was kind of a natural way for me to go. I've been asked to coach many people over time in my career, and my style of management was always much more of a coaching style as opposed to a directive style. So I looked at what I wanted to do moving forward. That way of operating fused with my experience, and then my fascination with people came together really neatly. I'd love the, as I said earlier, the psychology of the negotiation, understanding now the psychology and motivation of individuals to help them succeed and be as successful as they want to be. That became a real draw.
What is your approach when coaching? I know there are lots of different approaches to coaching. Do you have a particular style?
I think of it in a 4-stage process. So the first thing I like to build is empathy, both with the individual I'm working with, but help them build empathy and understanding for themselves. After that, help them get some real insights into them as an individual, and let them think about themselves honestly and objectively, and see where they can really work and improve and what they want to achieve. After that, I think about the actions that they need to take, almost like we used to do with data. We used to do a lot of testing and learning. What are those things that an individual can try and test and push themselves, start putting themselves out of their comfort zone, and measure how they feel and how they respond and how their performance improves. And if you get all those things right, my experience is everyone's able to make a surprising change.
And have you got any particular techniques that you engage in trying to achieve that?
I try and be as positive as I can when I work with individuals, be motivating for them so that they can motivate themselves. I try to do this by listening intently. I think we lack effective listening today. Everybody's too busy shouting and wanting to be heard. And I think in a coaching context, sitting back and listening to what the coach is telling me, but also enable them to listen to themselves so they can really understand the issues that they're grappling with. I'm a real one for individuals emphasising their strengths and trying to focus on what they're good at, because I've seen that in so many occasions be a driver of growth. And then, of course, one of the key things in positive psychology is to actually reflect on one's own performance. Self-reflection and self-discovery can be really useful tools when one is trying to change and grow.
So we've discussed your legal career and we've discussed your coaching career. What are the parallels, if any, between the two?
Yeah, I think there's some really interesting parallels, but also some contrasts between the two. I think as a coach, you're like a lawyer, an expert, bringing a skill into a conversation. And I think done well, both a lawyer and a coach listen intently and are keen to understand the true issues that a client might have, and be keen to drive the best outcome for that client. I think the difference with coaching, though, is it's much less advisory. You're not a consultant. You're enabling the client to find the solution to the particular challenge they have.
Thanks, Oliver. That was really interesting. But I understand that you've got some questions for me.
So the thing I'm really always interested when I talk to lawyers and ex-lawyers is, what attracted you to becoming a lawyer in the first place?
So I think what attracted me to the law was stubbornness, to be honest. I wanted to go to Cambridge. I had an idea in my head that was where I should go, and a number of people told me that I couldn't. And if people tell me I can't do something, then I tend to try and prove them wrong. And
brilliant. Love that.
I had a weird mix of A-levels. So the truth was, if I wanted to go to Cambridge, I couldn't, I needed to find something that fitted with my mix of A-levels, and law was one that ticked the boxes. So I kind of fell into it, really. I wanted to go into business. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I thought law would fit, and someone told me I couldn't, so I proved them wrong.
And then you went to Herbert Smith. What drove that choice?
So I guess there I was kind of on the treadmill. So I think when you go to Cambridge in particular to do law, you end up on a particular path. And I realised that I would be able to satisfy that itch of working with businesses by being a lawyer. And actually I qualified as a corporate lawyer because I found that getting underneath the bonnet of a company, the thing that really kind of interested me, and that was why I stayed with Herbert Smith. And
then, like everyone else on the treadmill, you moved to Chile.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a pretty unique treadmill. How did that occur?
I married a Chilean. He was in Chile, so that was why I went there. And that was interesting because I couldn't work as a lawyer when I arrived in Chile. So I, for a time, worked for a corporate finance practice doing deals. And it was at an earlier stage than you would normally get involved as a lawyer. So it was at the really early pitching stage, talking to companies about whether they did or didn't want to sell their companies, really getting to understand the motivations of the owners, and fascinating to see all that goes on before a lawyer even gets kind of the heads of terms on a table. But I was looking for another challenge. I move around a lot, so I ended up at the Foreign Office, working for UKTI and the Foreign Office jointly. I was involved in business development for the London Stock Exchange, and I also promoted the financial and legal services sector in Chile. I was still having that thread of being the person who had the big picture. I was connecting dots. I was making sure that the right people were talking to the right counterparts, and it was incredibly varied, and that was what kept me interested and motivated. And I was there for 7 years, which is a long time for me.
So when we first met, you were working running the marketing function of a law firm in Reading. How did you make that leap then back from Latin America back into the UK?
So again, it was personal life crossing over with the professional one. So I have 4 children, and my elder 2 are Chilean English, and I wanted them to have an education in the UK. I think that the British education system is great for critical thinking, and I never really contemplated going into a law firm to do marketing BD, but I was headhunted in Chile into a Chilean firm, and the senior partner there worked with me at the embassy, knew what I was about, had seen me doing business development for various other organisations, and wanted me to create a marketing function for his firm in Chile. When I came back to the UK, I continued in law. I continued doing marketing and business development for law firms. And as you say, when we met, I was in Reading heading up the marketing and business development function for a regional firm.
And how did that work, being the business development lead and having to work with and encourage lots of lawyers who probably didn't want to do any BD at all to enter into the BD world?
Yeah, it was a challenge. I think I had, a number of things. I think, first of all, BD and marketing in law firms has moved on a massive amount from when I was, starting my legal career at Herbert Smith. I remember the marketing team at Herbert Smith were in a different building, and I think I only once went there to get something on an A3 sheet of paper that I couldn't design myself. I think marketing and business development are critically important in law firms in a way that they weren't before. And I think that some fee earners really get that. Others, as you say, I think are more reluctant to do BD and marketing. So the role in-house is one where you really do need to be able to influence stakeholders. You really need to be able to understand stakeholders.
So do you use coaching, or did you use, I should say, coaching skills when you were in that role?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm much like you. I think I came to coaching because someone mentioned that that's what I was doing anyway. I think when you look at kind of CVs for marketing BD jobs, there's always a line that says you need to coach partners. And that led me to think, well, what does that mean really? What does coaching mean? What does being a good coach mean? And I came to realise when I kind of scratched below the surface that lots of the tools and techniques of coaching were tools that I was using already with partners. So it's about understanding, it's about putting judgment to one side, it's about helping people perform at their best, and the person that knows how to do that really is the person themselves. So it's about unlocking individuals' potential. And it's not about being directive. And I think that's really important, particularly in an in-house marketing role, because you're dealing with individuals who are very, very intellectual, who probably like me when I started out, and I'm not sure I'm much different now, but stubborn. And I think if you're dealing with people who are stubborn, who are intellectual, you can't just barge in and tell people what to do. You need to bring them along with you, and asking insightful questions is a really powerful way to get people to engage with you.
So do you think lawyers are coachable?
I think everyone's coachable. I think, the difficulty with coaching is I think lots of people go to coaching and that's what they're signing up for. I think there are different degrees of knowledge around what coaching actually is, and some people might go in with the expectation that they're getting one thing when actually they get something else. I think if you're coaching someone and they don't realise they're being coached, people respond to that in different ways. I definitely think that people, generally prefer to work things through themselves than just to be given the answer. Some people might like to be given the answers, but at the end of the day, you're not bought in if it's someone else's solution. So for you to feel committed to a course of action, it has to be your course of action. It has to be something you're committed to. And coaching for me is the only way to get that sort of level of commitment.
Are there any particular tools or techniques you like to use when you're coaching?
A good coach is a good listener. And I think if you can listen empathetically, that is the most important tool and technique that you can use. I think one of the most powerful techniques is silence. Nancy Klein, as you'll know, Oliver, has kind of written a lot about silence and creating that kind of space for someone to just talk. And it sounds really simple, but particularly as someone who's a chatterbox, it's really difficult to create that space and to create that silence.
Do you think silence can be a tool that lawyers could use more?
Absolutely. If you're dealing with people who are very skilled, who are being paid for their advice, I think there's a temptation that you have to say something clever, and silence is uncomfortable. And I've been in many client listening exercises, client feedback exercises, where the lawyer will jump in and not let the client finish their sentence. And it's not about having a psychology degree or a master's or having lots of tools and techniques up your sleeve. I think if lawyers just learn to sit back and listen a little more, and silence is a great way to do that, then I think they would achieve a much better understanding of their clients and be able to give much more solid advice.
Fantastic stuff. Thank you. Would you like to tell me a little bit about your company Client Talk? Because that sounds like a fascinating business and approach.
Yeah, so I guess the final stage of my career. So one of the things that I've always enjoyed is getting under the skin of different businesses. And I had it at the Foreign Office. I definitely had it at Herbert Smith when I was a corporate lawyer and involved with lots of different companies. So I wanted to step out and to have something where I could work with lots of different companies. And the thread throughout my career has really been joining the dots and seeing the bigger picture. So my company Client Talk brings together consulting and coaching. So one of the things that we look to do is drive growth through insight. And that's insight on a strategic level, and it's also insight on an individual level. So on a strategic level, it's looking at a company and making sure that they're really clear on where it is that they want to go, and making sure that they understand the reality of where they are versus their goal. So Oliver, you'll know GROW. I think it's the first thing that all coaches learn. And actually I use the GROW model in my consulting on the professional side. So for example, I'm working with a client now and we're trying to articulate their goal. So where do they want to be as a company? We're working on finding the insight as to where they are versus that goal. So talking to their clients, trying to understand, how far away they are from where they want to be, and then working through the options with them. And I do bring in coaching psychology. So whilst I'm a consultant, I'm very, very aware of the fact that, particularly when you're talking to partners who are owners of their business, they need to buy into what you're telling them. It has to be their solution. It has to be their passion. It has to be their goal. So I'm much less directive than I think I would be as a consultant if I wasn't also an accredited coach. And then on the personal side, on the insight, it is one-to-one coaching or team coaching, and it's about understanding as an individual how they fit into their organisations and how they can bring forward their firm strategy.
So it's a real kind of fusion of coaching and strategic business consulting. Is that a fair summation?
Yes. I haven't yet found a word that sums that all up, but yes, it's a.
No, we'd all like to find those words.
It's really kind of the culmination of everything I've done in my career through, as I said, being a very academic person to, kind of just picking up things throughout my career and it's what makes me me, and it's what makes hopefully my company unique.
That was Claire Rason speaking to Oliver Hansard, and of course Oliver Hansard speaking to Claire Rason. Thanks so much for listening. I do hope you enjoyed this episode. Lawyers Coach is brought to you by Client Talk and Hansard Coaching. If you're enjoying this series, please rate and leave a review, as it really helps others find us. Now, if you're a lawyer and would like to take part in the podcast, do visit our website, lawyercoach.co.uk, for further details. You can also join the conversation at our LinkedIn group, Lawyers Coach. And if there are any topics you'd like to hear us discuss, then get in touch. Once again, thanks for listening and goodbye.